Hello everyone. After getting some really good feedback from a previous tutorial that I made on creating a mandala in Adobe Illustrator, I decided to make a new video with a slightly updated method and hopefully clearer instructions on the step-by-step process for creating the template that you're going to use to create your mandala. And then that's going to be followed by sort of a 10-minute time lapse of me creating this. So this took me about an hour in Illustrator, and I have it sped up probably 5 or 6 times. So it's going to be about a 10-minute time lapse of me creating this. I'll also talk about some pointers on creating a mandala and making it look like a mandala and so on. So let's jump right into to creating our template to make our mandala. So I'm going to go to File, New, create a new document. And I like using a rather large document in pixels. If we start out with our default size, I think it's around 300 by 600 or something like that. Basically what happens is whenever you make strokes, if you want to go any smaller than 1 point, you have to go into decimal points, so 0.75 or 0.5. So I like making my document fairly large so I can just deal with whole numbers as far as my stroke size goes, and I rarely have to go below a 1. So we'll go with 2000 by 2000 and hit create. And then we're going to go over to, which by default is set to your line tool. We're going to go left click on that and hold and select the polar grid tool. And then double click that polar grid tool. By default, I think this is set to 5 and 5. I'm not concerned about concentric dividers. We don't need any of those. So I'm going to hit 0. Go back in there. And the mandala that we're creating is a 6-pointed mandala. So if we cancel this and go back and look at this, you'll see that there's 6 points here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But each one of these points is mirrored. So we can essentially create 12 symbols and just draw on one half of them, and then it's going to get mirrored and rotated around. So if I wanted a 6-point mandala, then I'm going to do radial dividers is going to be 12. Now it's up to you how many points you want your mandala to have. You can do 8, you can do 4. Just make sure it's an even number. So it's not going to work if it's like 13, but it will work if it's even 10. So you'd have a 5-pointed mandala. So that would work. So whatever you want to do, and you can do multiples of these too. So I could do a 6-pointed mandala, and then behind that one I could do a 4-pointed mandala, and get some very interesting designs with that. But we're going to go with 12. Hit OK, and then I'm just going to drag out while holding Shift to maintain that perfect circle. And then we need to get rid of a lot of this stuff because basically all I want is that one slice. So I'm going to go over to my direct select tool, and I'm just going to marquee over this bottom section and then hit delete. I'll marquee over this right section, hit delete, and then I'm just going to delete these 2 paths here like that. So next I'm going to zoom in really close to these guys. Try to get as close as I possibly can. And basically what I want to do is create a point, a new point right there. So I'm going to go to my pen tool, add anchor point tool, and I'm going to try and line that up the best I can and create a new point right there. And then I can go back to my direct select tool and I can delete. There's a point there too, so you got to make sure you delete that one. So I'm going to delete both of those points. Now I can join these paths together. However, Currently, if I look over in my Layers tab, you'll see that they're kind of arranged oddly in these weird groups. In order to join them together, I need them to be either in the same group or not in any group at all. So I'm just going to drag these paths out into layer 1. So above all those subgroups. And then I'm going to select that group and just delete it. So now I should only have 3 strokes, and I can join these paths together. So I'm going to go to my direct selection tool, just sort of go over those bottom 2 points, go to Object, Path, Join. I'll do that for these points here. Object, Path, Join. So now basically those 3 strokes are one path now. So one more time, I'm going to zoom in really close to this corner. And what I want to do is I want to make this a solid line. So I'm going to go to my pen tool. I'm going to click on this point, so that will start, sort of pick up where it left off on that path. And then I'm going to just close that path there like that. So now I have a completely enclosed shape. And that's ready to go. Now at this point, if you move it, it's not going to matter too much. Basically, you just don't want to move it after you have everything sort of placed. The other thing we want to make sure that we have on the symbol is no stroke. So just to kind of explain why you don't want a stroke, if I make the stroke quite a bit bigger, whenever we create this into a symbol, we want our pivot point to be precisely on this point. If it's off at all, then it's not going to match up. If we have a stroke on our path, then the pivot point is going to be down here and not up here. So it's very important to make sure you have no stroke on your shape. And you can have a color. We'll give it like a light gray color. And that's our slice. Now here's where my new method sort of deviates from the old method. So in order to keep this clean, and say as we're drawing on our slice, if we go out of the lines, we don't want to see that. So in order to keep this clean, what we're going to do is sort of make a symbol inside of a symbol. So hopefully that'll make sense whenever we start working here. So I'm going to select this object, and I'm going to Control-C to copy it. And then I'm going to Control-Shift-V to paste in place. So at this point, it's very important that you don't move anything. So don't even try to select something from this document. If you're doing any selections, select in your layers. So don't, because if you say just grab something a little bit, you can move it, and that will sort of mess everything up. So we have 2 shapes here. The first one, so we'll go with this bottom one here. We're going to create a new symbol. So I'm going to select that bottom shape, clicking on that guy, and we're going to go to New Symbol. We will call this Mandala Drawing. Export type, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to make it a graphic, a static symbol, and registration is going to be bottom right corner. Very important. Hit OK. Now normally this is where I would start duplicating around and mirroring. We're going to go one more step, and we're going to create a clipping path and then a new symbol on top of that. So if we draw outside of the lines, we won't see where we kind of go outside of the lines. So to do that, I'm going to select my duplicate path and my new symbol here, which is now called Mandala Drawing. So I'm going to select both of those guys. I'm going to go to Object, Clipping Path, or Clipping Mask, Make. And then we get this clip group here. And now I'm going to use this layer 1 and create yet another symbol. So this is going to be a symbol within a symbol. So we'll name this one Mandala Slice. Again, make it a graphic, static symbol, and registration, bottom right corner. Hit OK. We have two symbols in here. So the one we're going to be drawing on is Mandala Drawing. The one we're going to be duplicating around is Mandala Slice, because this one has the clipping path, and this is where all of our drawing is going to be. So the one that's in our scene currently is the Mandala Slice. So if we expand our layer 1, you'll see that that is Mandala Slice. So I'm now going to go to Object, Transform, Rotate, and because we have 6 divisions, we're going to rotate 60 degrees. This is going to be different if you have a different pointed mandala. So if you have a 8-pointed, 5-pointed mandala, this is going to be a different value, just 360 divided by however many points you have. So in my case, that is 60. We didn't divide by 12 because we're going to mirror that side of it. So we're going to rotate 1/2 and then, or we're going to rotate all of our points and then we're going to mirror them. So I'm going to hit copy. And then if you look up Object, Transform, Transform again is Control D. So I'm going to hit Control D 4 more times. So that will give us all of our points. Now we need to duplicate them. So I'm going to select all of those guys, or now we need to mirror them, sorry. And we're going to go to Transform, Object, Transform, Reflect, and then hit Copy. Now you should have a perfect circle with no gaps. If you have gaps, something got moved at some point, and you're going to need to start over. Or maybe back up a few steps and just make sure, be very careful not to move anything, especially when you start creating the symbols, because that's when things get sort of messed up. So then I can lock that entire layer. So I won't be able to accidentally move anything around. I'm just going to lock that layer. And whenever I want to draw inside of my mandala, I'm going to come over here to my Symbols tab. And I'm going to double click on my mandala drawing. And that will bring me into this isolation mode with just that symbol. So now I can come in with, say, my blob brush and start drawing shapes. And if I back out of that, it gets updated all the way around. So the big difference between this and my old method is that you can't see the other shapes as you're working, but it's definitely a lot cleaner because when we back out, we'll see that even though I drew outside of the lines here, that gets clipped off because inside of our mandala slice is a clipping path. Now, as far as pointers go for how to create a nice looking mandala, one thing that I would recommend is trying to be mindful that all your different elements of your mandala, try to think of them as different objects rather than just lines. So when my students do this project, a lot of them will go in and just sort of start making lines and do things like this. And if we back out, it just doesn't really look like a mandala. It just looks like a design that's got some radial symmetry. So it's very important to think of all of your different design elements as different shapes. So we have our different leaves. We have this sort of shape with a sun symbol on it. We have this sort of blade thing. We got an eye. We have a flame. So think of all your different design elements as different shapes or different objects that are kind of stacked on top of each other rather than just lines. And if you're going to do just lines, think of them as a part of that object. So for example, this leaf here with the eyeball on it, it's got just lines and dots on it, but because it's enclosed by that outline, it seems like it's one object and not just a bunch of lines floating in space. So the other thing I would recommend is think about varying line widths. So having different line widths will give the illusion of depth, and that's basically what we're trying to create here is the illusion of depth. So it looks like there's petals on a flower, or they're kind of stacked, layered on top of each other, rather than, again, just floating lines. And then lastly, if you're going to use color at all, try to keep it simple. Don't pick colors at random. Go to Adobe Color or a color scheme designer. I think it's colorschemedesigner.com or .net or something like that, and pick like a nice complementary color scheme to use. Don't just pick colors at random. Mandalas tend to have so much detail in the line work. If you have random colors, all these different colors, it just makes it too much for the eye to handle. So if you do want to use color, keep it very simple, monochromatic or a complementary color scheme. Okay, so next we're going to go into a time lapse of me creating this mandala. I hope this is a little bit easier to understand than my last tutorial. Feel free to comment, give feedback. I'm more than happy to create more videos on any topic in Illustrator or Photoshop for that matter. Let me know what you think, and if I can help out with any issues in any way. I'm pretty active in the comments, so don't hesitate to ask questions. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.